I guess one thing I didn't do very well was really be aware of the way that the modern world works around visibility, B2B sales, networking being, I mean, everyone says networking is so crucial. And I had a great network because I'd worked with a lot of different companies, but I hadn't been someone who had gone out and really attended lots of events, and you kind of ingratiated myself with a lot of new and different people that weren't in my direct work network. I've done more of that since going out on my own. One of the things that I guess I did learn was, and that was quite quickly, was joining forums and groups. And there's lots of communities out there in the space or the niche that you think you're going to operate in or that you specialise in. And so I made myself present in those spaces and got to know a few other, what would typically be seen as competitors, but actually are companions and allies and collaborators from my perspective. So I guess I grew my network quite quickly in that manner.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of Ways to Wealth. Today we have Emily with us. Emily, why don't you give us the too long didn't read about yourself and where you're at today and what you're working on?
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Too long didn't read. Haven't really thought this one through, but I'm good at speaking in verbose terms. So
that's good.
I guess the short version is I'm an organisational psychologist. I am someone who works kind of in organisations and on organisations, so on the business, but also with a human lens and the work system around it. I'm a consultant working for myself predominantly and also in association with other organisations as an adjunct to their services. I guess the history, the short version of my history is graduated from university with a psychology degree. Guess an interesting piece of insight there is had no idea what I was going to do with my degree. I'm one of those people that followed purely my passions, my interests, the things that made me happy, the things that I was good at. So I did kind of science and psych at uni. And it wasn't until the final lecture of a stage 3 stats course I was doing for psych, where some postgrad supervisors came in to share with the group what some of those postgrad options looked like. And there I heard from a number of different supervisors, from kind of behavioural stuff through to org psych, and I'd never heard of it before. And 5 minutes of a spiel from a supervisor, and I was kind of sold on that pathway. So I guess org psych's quite interesting because it's a blend of business and psychology, and I always wanted to work in the business world. My dad's self-employed, always has been, and liked the idea of the autonomy and the influence, I guess.
So have you been kind of consulting and self-employed for most of your career, if not all of it?
No.
No.
Is the short answer.
Okay.
Yeah, so I started out like a traditional pathway for a psych is to go into a consultancy. If you're not going to go straight in-house into a corporate, for example, and work within their HR space on kind of L&D leadership development or hiring and selection. But I went into the consultancy side and started traditionally in the personality assessment and kind of intellectual cognitive testing.
Oh, okay, cool.
So a lot of that was in the hiring space and attraction, helping organisations find the right people to fit their needs, role, culture, etc.
And have you focused, or is most of this work typically done at larger organisations?
Typically, yeah. So historically, when I first started, it was kind of the big corporate machines, so law firms, accounting firms, those really big multinational or national corporates. And then over the years, kind of that space evolved a lot in terms of hiring for fit rather than hiring for experience. So yeah, I guess I got to work into a lot of small to medium enterprises that way and across a broad range of roles that were no longer just kind of the lawyers and the accountants.
Yeah.
But from a consulting perspective, I went out on my own about 5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
And what kind of catalyzed that? Like, what was the reason?
Many things. So I was getting fairly stale, I guess. I'd had a lot of evolution in my roles from kind of an advisor / person doing the grunt work and having meetings around who was the right person for the job through to kind of leading up a consulting branch within an organization. So I'd had a lot of growth, but I was feeling like the domain of my work was quite confined.
Right.
And I had 3 young children. I was working for my ex-partner at the time, whose business was going through some quite tricky change.
Yeah.
So I'd taken a step back from my consulting role and had the 3 kids, and then was trying to help him salvaging the business and kind of divesting of a number of organizations that were not doing well.
Right.
So kind of self-administration, I guess.
Yeah.
And then coming back to work after that, I quickly realized that I wanted a more strategic involvement with work. And that experience kind of lent itself quite well with, I guess, more senior levels of consulting rather than down in the weeds, so to speak. So it took about a year to try and extricate myself from that role.
Yes, role.
Yeah, and then set my...
You must have learned a lot in that role, though, because doing those hard kind of things is you learn a lot.
Yes.
Find a lot. You find a lot about yourself, I imagine, but also just kind of going through those different things you wouldn't typically go through unless you were obviously kind of doing those sort of wind up activities in different kind of ways, and kind of dealing with people, I guess, around that as well. So that must have been quite a growth experience.
It was huge. Yeah, it was, I probably learned 2 key things. One about myself was what I had capacity for and my kind of resilience, I guess, to one foot in front of the other, keep on trucking through all the challenges, because there were so many. And the other thing I think I learned was the importance of humanity and relationships, and salvaging as much of the goodwill that you have between the business and a supplier or a customer or a key stakeholder, but also for yourself, I guess, to be able to walk through that situation kind of holding your head high and not feeling like you've done the dirty or aggrieved anyone in the process. So it was a lot of, I need this from you. Are you able to help me out here? And how can we meet in the middle of that? And how can I protect your interests while also resolving this situation, which was complex and particularly financially driven a lot of the time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I think that's been really interesting, because also Auckland, New Zealand is a small place, and so
Totally.
you don't want to burn any bridges, because you're going to come across those people time and again. Yeah, there's not that many bridges in Auckland. Yeah, so that was really fascinating, and I think learning how to front up to hard conversations was huge. You know, it's easy to kind of stick your head in the sand or turn the other way and hope that that will be forgotten or the problem will go away. And I think we do that a lot in our personal relationships as well. And kind of get through the tricky stuff and then out the other side and never readdress what happened.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So it was a lot of walking into a meeting with myself and then, you know, several people with money on the table in a room, and trying to explain the context and the situation and the path forward as we saw it, and how to meet everyone's needs. So yeah, that was quite big.
Yeah, that's cool. And I guess the strategic stuff you then have moved into after is probably a little bit lighter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, you're not as in the weeds.
I'm not burning up the people's cash this time around. Hopefully.
True. Well, that's good. And I guess it's, I don't know, consulting has implementation layers, but like at a strategic level. And I imagine for a consultant, if they get the right client, they don't have to think about implementation at all, unless that's what they want to do. So it's like being an uncle or something. You get to give the problem back at the end of the day.
Yeah, like the advice giver.
Yeah.
And wash your hands of it. Ideally not. Yeah, ideally you are strategic and you have got a voice and influence, and I guess, you're seeing a business or a part of a business from the outside in and with fresh eyes, which often gets lost. When people kind of trudge through that same landscape over and over, you end up kind of getting a little closed in to the problems or the challenges or the why nots. So it's quite empowering to be able to sit at an executive table or with a board or with a key decision maker and say, I think you should do this because, and here's how we might approach it.
Yeah.
But I think it's really rewarding when you get to see that actually executed over time.
Totally.
And sadly, as a consultant, you do often get left at the I'll make an assessment and some recommendations and then see you later. But there are some projects where you get to work on more of a hand-holding or a coaching basis,
Yeah.
which are really fascinating because, and I think in-house,
Probably get more closure as well on your ideas.
certainly, yeah, see how they land, what works, what doesn't. It's good experimentation
Totally.
as a consultant.
What's like one of the most interesting challenges that or not challenges, but like projects, which obviously entail challenges that like kind of reminded you why you kind of are doing this consulting piece and, working on your own. Well, not that you're necessarily working on your own because you said you work in collaboration with other organizations, but
Yes.
has there been any projects or any kind of like pieces of work that you've done that like was like, oh, that was really cool, I was impactful and the challenges were stimulating?
I think every project feels like that to me.
Okay.
And that's an interesting way to look at it, perhaps, because some projects, like I really enjoy the times where you do a big strategic piece of work. So you assess a situation or a specific part of the organization, and go back with some insights, your analysis and your recommendations. And sometimes, quite often, the initial reaction to that is, we didn't want to hear this, or it's, those changes are too drastic or whatever it might be. So there's a bit of that kind of the gap between where you see things to be and should go and where the people in the organization believe they sit. So that start point versus the strategic aspirations that you might have.
Totally.
So I like those projects because often, a few months later, as we're working through some of those recommendations, or 9 months, 12 months down the track when they've put some things in place and they're getting really positive feedback, I love that transformation. And it's almost a mindset shift rather than we've had these wins and hit these milestones, but it's a kind of an uplift in sentiment because of doing the hard yards.
Yeah, totally.
And then I've got another project at the moment, which is really exciting. It's for the kind of an educational institution, and instead of going in and doing discrete pieces of work, it's more around allowing their internal teams to come up with some ideas, create some committees around, around the areas that they're prioritizing for change, and then us guiding them on how to do it, what could be done, what shouldn't be done, what those priorities are. So it's a long-term partnership. So we'll work with them for 12 months.
And what's the outcome these people are typically looking for when you come in? Like, is there like an outcome they want?
Better.
Just their team is better?
The business is better. So usually there's, so it might be an engagement piece of work. So the outcome usually relates to a problem that they face. So a lot of the time we've got high turnover. We don't know why. We don't know what to do about it. We can't keep people. It's impossible to hire the right people. It might be a strategic change program. So we're working towards employer value proposition, becoming an attractive place to work, or our engagement's low. Or we're trying to implement a strategic project which may be about sustainability or ESG or long-term growth outcomes, but we don't have the people capability internally.
Right.
So that's where a lot of, I guess, the crunch point seems to land, which is, leadership practice and capability needs to evolve to be able to work in a more adaptive or agile manner rather than stuck in this traditional kind of production operational model that we've got.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. What's the lowest hanging fruit typically in these situations? Maybe for an SME that may not have the resource to kind of spend too much time on this, or maybe they don't feel like they need to, even though they perhaps should. What's like always a low hanging fruit piece that you can kind of use to increase engagement and reduce your turnover?
From a all of business perspective, so I think one of the things that I often see lacking or missing altogether, especially in an SME, perhaps is kind of where you grow beyond a threshold where you've got an easy touch point with a lot of your people. So if you think about kind of the hierarchy of an organization and how the comms and the strategy and the objectives cascade down through the structures.
Yeah.
I think people lose touch when they lose literal touch with the people that work around them. So, and you see it in big organizations as well, as we're not crystal clear on our strategic intent. We don't know who we are, why we exist, what problems we're solving, and what direction we're heading. So, an easy analogy is kind of, are we all in the same waka, paddling in the same direction to the same destination?
Totally.
Do we know what that destination looks like, why we're heading there, and are we all in the same boat, paddling in the same direction? Because often you get lost in the your function does this and this technical expert group does this, and we all do things in silo and isolation. So I think a low-hanging fruit is being really clear on your strategic intent, having that well documented, well communicated, and then those constant leadership updates and good news stories.
Yep.
Especially in a tricky work environment where a lot of businesses are going through change or potentially going under. It's how do you keep generating goodwill internally to keep your people humming into the same direction. So that's potentially a really big job, but can also be really easy as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, make sure everyone's rowing in the same direction.
Yeah.
The same boat.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Makes sense. So how does a consultant that's going out on their own kind of because obviously the freedom's there, and we talk to people and we ask, what does wealth mean to you? And often people go, well, it's freedom of choice, really. Ultimately, capital can be a utility for that freedom of choice, because you can be like, well, I can choose to take 6 months off and not run out of capital, like cash, right? Or something like that. But it's like, often people are like, well, as long as I'm doing the things I like doing and I feel stimulated and I feel like I guess I'm achieving something, which I think when businesses go through difficult times, and obviously in starting a business, it's so difficult. Having started a few and scaled them, going from 0 to 1 is very difficult, and you can be very close or you can get there, and then very hard to kind of, from a strategical standpoint, maybe communicate that with your team, especially if it's something that hasn't been done before. Little bit easier where you're on a bit of a path that has already been set out for you through previous kind of endeavors and businesses.
Yeah.
But for someone that's kind of looking to potentially go out on their own and actually build a great career, and I know so many people that have built really great careers, been really financially successful through doing consulting and having a kind of solo consulting practice. Have you seen other people, or are there any tips and tricks that you've used to kind of, I guess, create that success? And not just in the work, but also, of course, like, you want some financial success, right? You don't necessarily need to make millions and millions of dollars, but you want to make sure that you feel comfortable and you don't have this angst. So are there any hacks that you use, and what do you think some like key pieces of advice you would give around kind of making sure that you're being well fed as a consultant?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm not sure if I'm a good blueprint to follow. I think everyone will have their own kind of MO around this.
Yeah.
One of the things, I guess, being really measured and considered going into that transition is probably a good idea. So, luckily for me, I had, well, to a point, I guess, as much security as one can have when they're working in a volatile landscape. But I, am in a relationship. I've got a partner with an income stream. So for me, transitioning to consulting and knowing that I will be dropping back on my income and my ability to kind of service our outgoings was going to take a few years to kind of get back to a net point.
Yep.
And so I was aware of that kind of reality, and that was something that we jointly made a decision around, and we were able to kind of sort out together. But I guess one thing I didn't do very well was really be aware of the way that the modern world works around visibility, B2B sales, networking everyone says networking is so crucial. And I had a great network because I'd worked with a lot of different companies, but I hadn't been someone who had gone out and really attended lots of events, and you kind of ingratiated myself with a lot of new and different people that weren't in my direct work network. So I've done more of that since going out on my own.
Yeah.
One of the things that I guess I did learn was, and that was quite quickly, was joining forums and groups. And there's lots of communities out there in the space or the niche that you think you're going to operate in or that you specialize in. And so I made myself present in those spaces and got to know a few other, what would typically be seen as competitors, but actually are companions and allies and collaborators from my perspective. So I guess I grew my network quite quickly in that manner. And then I guess there's that piece of consulting where you kind of say yes to everything, as it comes to you, in the hopes that you can build back up that income stream.
Totally.
And then perhaps over time you kind of niche down again into some areas of specialty if that's what you're interested in. I tend to take quite a broad approach in the sense that some of those are kind of affiliate partnerships that I've got are in quite niche spaces. So one's in a well-being capacity or psychosocial risk management, and another is in a leadership coaching forum. And then my business more broadly, I consult kind of on any kind of generalist matter from hiring and selection up to strategic board decision making and kind of any human elements, I guess, in between. So I've gone diverse, I've gone broad, and that's because I enjoy a systems lens. I enjoy thinking top down and big picture, and I like the stimulation of having to be across multiple elements of, I guess, that landscape.
Yeah.
Whereas other people would go really specific into a niche and do one thing and do it really well, and I admire that. And I guess having a network and having, skills and experience to support that over the years prior to consulting would probably be something that leads you in that direction. So cash flow management's another one.
For yourself, personally, for a consultant?
Yeah, as a consultant.
Like provisional tax and different things like that, I guess, and when you first go on board, I guess now we've got stuff like Henry that makes it a lot easier for sole traders. But I guess when you started, Henry was probably just getting started. You may not have known about it, and I don't even know if you use it now.
No, I don't. I actually have a kind of advisor who does it for me, and I manage Xero myself, which is the wrong solution for the size of business that I have, but probably.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. Whatever works for you, right? I think that's the main thing as well.
Yeah, makes life easy for me. And then, just I do my best through the year, and then someone else cleans up the mess I've made at the end of it. So, I mean, I do think you've got to be really prudent and cautious rather than overly excited when it comes to.
Do you get, I don't know if it's like other businesses, but do you find that you get some kind of bursts of kind of work, and then those that you kind of get wins where it's like, oh, that was not like a normal month, and then do you have any tactics around I don't know, about planning, doing stuff like holidays or kind of investing for the future based on those wins that you get, because those are kind of the non-linear wins that kind of give you a bit of a leg up, and it might be a piece of cash flow that you wouldn't normally get. So do you use those as motivation, and you allocate them, or do you kind of be like, oh, I'm gonna nuzzle away some for the next month because it might not be as a big a month?
Yes, absolutely. Works like this for me in terms of what's coming in each month, and it's completely unpredictable. I'll have nothing for the next 3 months, and then all of a sudden a project will land that we've had a conversation about 9 or 18 months ago, and they'll want it done now, and it will consume me for 8 to 12 weeks or something like that. So it's really volatile and unpredictable in my experience. Like last year I had quite a mellow year until the last quarter around December, and then I did probably a third to a half of my annual earnings in one quarter. So I do things like just try and pay myself the set amount each month that is a more conservative rate, and try and advance pay kind of provisional tax and things like that, so that's all cleared for when things get quieter again. But you do need to be able to roll with the punches significantly and have enough flex. So the flex concept goes both ways. It's, I can say yes and no to things that I want to, but also when the work comes, you kind of need to just knuckle down and do it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I think having a good support system and structure. I mean, I've got a busy family life, so my hours per week are capped unless I want to run my health into the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just need to be really sensible, and I've learned over the years, and I'm finding it kind of a no-brainer now, and I don't know why everyone doesn't do this, but it took me a long time to get there. Was, when a client asks you for something and says, when can you get it to me by? So rather than the initial reaction, or the end of the week, or tomorrow, or the earliest time frame you can possibly fathom, I just say, I can't do that till next month, or that's going to take me 14 days to get back to you, or
Right.
I push out in a more conservative manner so that I buy a little bit more time. And don't think I've ever had someone say, sorry, that's not going to work.
Right. Yeah. No, that's true. I think we can get, as if you're a solo entrepreneur, which a consultant is,
Yes.
or not just any entrepreneur that's trying to kind of hustle and kind of generate that momentum, you kind of your instinct is, I can do it I can do it now.
Service mindset.
Yeah, which is probably not the best way to think about it, long term, especially, right? So you said when we were chatting, you said you were starting something, startup. So
Startup, yes.
yeah, tell me
Yep.
more.
So we've got a baby business called Stones, I guess is the out there name. It is a kind of a modern concept, I guess, on leadership development, because as you probably know, there's thousands and thousands of leadership development solutions and platforms out there. So it's a piece of tech, and it's essentially designed with the modern leader in mind. It's a hub, it's a knowledge base for leaders to come and micro learn on different concepts on the broad kind of topic of general leadership.
Right.
So it's the skills, the knowledge, the expertise that you don't learn in that technical role that often shoots you into a leadership position. And because leadership is such a generalist skill set, it's broad. So it's anything from understanding more about governance and the ins and outs and what a board expects and is responsible for, how to report into that board or receive instruction from them, through to hiring and developing people, through to self-management as an individual, EQ, operating models, how to be agile and adaptive in your rhythms. So broad, but the idea is that it's also a community and a network of knowledge and expertise. So rather than going onto a LinkedIn learning, say, and going, I'll pick that topic because I don't really know what I need, it's self-determined in the sense that you reflect on competence and confidence that you've got in certain areas of the leadership role, and it helps to serve up personalized recommendations for you on your path. So, and we've also got a network of people here on the ground who deliver the learning content. So if you do a piece of learning around, say, ESG or sustainability, it's from someone local who you can then call up or engage for a project that you might need them on board for, or some coaching work, for example.
Totally. And who is your customer typically? Or who are you aiming it at? Who's the ideal person would use it?
So we originally conceptualized it. So I guess I'll take a step back for a second. The idea was born because of the two work streams I typically work in. Is one, individual one-on-one leadership coaching, and then the strategic org consulting as well. So the coaching conversations were always different context, different person, different, problems or experience, but often the same conversations coming out around core skills and know-how or ways of approaching situations that we're kind of time and time again having those different same discussions with different people.
Totally.
And then the strategic work is often stuck because of the leadership capability isn't up to speed with some of these ideas or ways of working that are necessary for how we work now in this world. So the customer we originally positioned it for was kind of small to medium enterprise, where maybe there's not an in-house L&D function or an HR function or an ops team who are helping with some of those rhythms and structures and concepts. And so from a D2C perspective, that's still an avenue. But a lot of the conversations I've had subsequent to launching it is, with bigger organizations who've got limited leadership development budget or who have in-house programs that are pitched either at the senior execs, that might be like a week-long retreat and a really immersive, expensive
Yep.
way of upskilling, or kind of the foundational program for emerging leaders that help those people get up into that space. But then there's this big cavity between those layers where people are just expected to know or to work it out for themselves. And so this is really accessible from a price point kind of a way for them.
And it's for the business owner themselves, or for just a leader in the SME?
It could be really any leader in a general leadership capacity. So someone who's a manager or a leader, but probably GM and above is really the level that it's pitched at.
Totally. Awesome.
But there's really broad business kind of education in there as well. So if you don't know much about DE&I, for example, there's learning on that will help you.
And it's functional, it's in market now and people can consume it?
Very early days. So, we're just going out there. Kind of a better organisational kind of approach that we're doing at the moment for some bigger org customers. But from a D2C perspective, anyone can go on and subscribe.
Cool. Awesome. And what would success look like then in 5 years with your consultancy and your startup, Stones?
Yeah. So
you fast forward 5 years.
I think if I've got, there's 5 of us actually involved in Stones at the moment.
Right.
So we are very much bootstrapping. We're doing this on the side of our day jobs.
Good idea.
So, but we all believe passionately about the product and the opportunity. So I think 5 years from now, we'd all be working full time in it, or a version of full time.
Yeah.
We've all got busy lives and families and things to juggle. So a bit more autonomy, a bit more freedom from a personal perspective, but the impact and the reach would be, exponential compared to what I can do with my consultancy as one person. So that was really, the need is great, and there's heaps of people out there delivering on this, but how do we cohere that all into a really nice packaged platform where it's really easy to make those connections and join the dots for people? So
totally.
I think success will be, we're all working away, beavering away in it, and it's creating value for our end users. Hopefully there's an organisational uplift in terms of capability and mindset and opportunities that it generates, and hopefully from a societal perspective as well, we're giving back to the community in a way that is, education first and outcomes.
Yeah. Do you have like a clear vision associated with the company yet? Have you guys mused on anything like that yet? Like we've got something quite clear.
Yes. It's evolving. Our vision is to uplift leaders and in turn businesses, and then humanity essentially.
Totally.
What we hope we will do is make that a really practical, localized thing. So our vision, I guess, from a commercial business sense, is that we can test the model here in New Zealand and Australia. So that's our incubator kind of geography, and then iterate as we go into other markets. So that is a localized thing, whether that's we bring people in from outside and have them invest and be involved in building it in other territories, or license it, or sell it, or whatever that looks like. But growth and reach globally is really the driver for us. Yeah.
Well, this has been really cool. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
I'm glad to have found out more about what you do, and I am quite fascinated by kind of leadership and building a team and helping a team go forward in the same direction. So I think I've taken a few things away, and I think it's something that every leader, whether they be a business owner or just a leader of a team, and or in any sort of sphere, even if it's recreational, like in sports teams and stuff, it's super important. And when you're on to something because it feels a little bit more flowy. So it's really cool that you're giving people the tools to kind of get that flow state through their leadership. So awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
No problem.